Joey?
Yeah, one second, brother.
Sure.
We're coming on right now. All right, go ahead. And this is 96.1 FM, Po People's Revolutionary Radio. I'm JV, and you're listening to Free Aztlan. And today we have a very special guest, Cruz Olmeda-Becerra. And, many of you know this brother and this camarada of the Chicano movement, founder of the original Brown Berets, and of La Junta. This brother has an extensive history of struggle within the movement for the Chicano nation, for the Chicano people, against colonization, uh, imperialism, all forms of oppression. And I'm very happy to have this brother here, on the show on Free Aztlan. So, welcome, Brother Cruz, to Free Aztlan.
Thank you, Joey. I'm very happy to be here. Very excited.
Well, thank you, brother. And you know, most of the listeners to Free Aztlan, they're familiar with Chicano history and all of that, and some ain't. So some, we're gonna be asking a lot of questions. I'm sure, you've been asked before, but and this is part of history, and personally, I do feel that it's very important to record history, especially from elders of the movement, those who paved the way for us today, who cut that path, with the machete, cut that path through the through the bushes and through the and just cut that trail of resistance for us in order to have a map, in order to and as time goes on, things of course evolve. Nothing is static, but we do have a blueprint of where, what direction we're going into. And personally, as I said, I feel very honored to have you here, in order to record this history, brother. And so before I get into that, I just I know you grew up in Compton and Watts, and I had one question about that, brother. Quickly, um, you know, now we see Compton and Watts, but when you were growing up, was there a lot of raza there in Compton and Watts when you grew up?
No, there was not something, no. It was mostly black, mostly African American. My high school and the junior high school were about 95% African American and about 5% Chicano.
Okay.
That's what so that had a big influence on how I read the world and how I reacted to the racism and oppression of African Americans.
Yeah, right. And a lot of people don't see deep repression, and when you are around it and you see it, you learn different ways to resist as well. I agree with you, brother. But let me get into, as looking at your history, I know you were, as many people were of the time, forced, not, there was a lot of pressure into basically, either go to prison or, go into the US military. And you were one of the ones that ended up in the Navy, in the military, and in particular in Vietnam. This is a time of war with the US war on Vietnam. And I just wanted to ask you, brother, and I've always thought about this. I know at the time of the US war on Vietnam that a lot, there was a lot of uprisings across these false US borders. There was a lot of people rising up in resistance. And I always wondered, and I've never been able to ask somebody, but while you were there, was there any, how did that affect the soldiers the brown and black soldiers? How did it affect them? Did it influence them? You know, was there any kind of forms of resistance in any form that you saw while you were in Vietnam of brown or black soldiers?
There was no organized resistance because I was a boy chief. And so I be involved in sailors when it came to port, and also on the ship. But and then I enlisted when I was 17. It's 1962. I was 17 years old. I was a junior in high school when I enlisted. And but I didn't go really after I graduated high school. The first rebellion that took place while I was in the Navy was in August of 1965, which was the Watts Rebellion. And I was in Tokyo at the time. And I looked up on the marquee and it said, "Three killed and Captain rioting." And I thought, I don't Captain, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why would he be on the front page of the papers of Tokyo?
Right.
I knew that was going on a few days later. But yeah, that did have an influence. But mostly, but it was early on.
Mm.
Mostly for the rebellion that took place, and the resistance was spontaneous. It wasn't in an organized way. For example, in the Philippines, they come up off of Liberty, we get on cattle trucks, and the cattle trucks will take us to the ships. On those cattle trucks, there would be four sailors, black and white, and all hell would break loose. That's where the fight would take place. People would be thrown out of the trucks, and the trucks would run over them, and on board the ships. Not on my ship was smaller, or on aircraft carriers, there was race riots there too. And when those race riots took place, the Navy would arrest only the black sailors, and put only the black sailors on trial. No white sailors.
Wow.
And they convicted them.
Wow.
And a lot of, obviously, a lot of people were doing this, because it takes two to have a race riot.
Yeah.
And they only arrested and tried the black sailors. So that had an impact as well. But as far as that organized, there was a lot of segregation. When you went to work, and you went to go to the bars, one section was for black sailors, and one was for non-black, Asian, Chicanos, and every port was like that for Japan and the Philippines.
Wow.
Because they knew if we were together,
Yeah.
and we were drinking,
Yeah. And that's really interesting because even outside of Vietnam, outside of the military, we know that's a tactic that the oppressor nation, the white oppressor nation uses, where they, separate. It goes back thousands of years. Divide and conquer. Separate the oppressed, and that way, their strength is sapped. And this way, you're better able to, overpower them. So even in the military, they utilize this tactic of divide and conquer, as you explained, of separating people. Um, you know, But anyway, let me and of course the soldiers I know didn't know it was an imperialist war, right? They didn't. Did you ever run into any U.S. soldiers who were conscious, who understood that this was an imperialist, grab for resources?
early on, again, it was one of the sailors who refused to look at the ship. And he tried to explain to me, but I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't understand that it actually stopped what we were doing. And the fact that the real people, that's when we had experience that became anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, and the socialist while on the ship. But it was on the basis of the experience that I had, not because somebody tried to explain it to me.
Okay. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead, brother.
Yeah, okay, firstly, what happened with me was that we were involved in an incident that was really a horrifying incident where the people that did not really pay a heavy price for it. And it shocked me. So when I came back to Japan, I went to commissary and I picked up some books because I don't know why I was doing this. And why I was doing those people.
Yeah.
So I, three books were on the struggle of civil rights movement in this country, and three books dealt with the anti-colonial struggle and neo-colonialism. And so I read them all, and the one that probably affected me the most was one by James Baldwin. It was called The Fight of Exton.
Yeah, he's badass.
After that, I was back in sea, and I remember the day that I said, okay, I've seen enough, I read enough, and I'm going to decide what I think. And then I decided that I got by myself with a fun partnership, and okay, I'm against this war. This war is a product of imperialism, versus capitalism. So I have to be against capitalism, I have to be against imperialism,
Mm,
And even though I never read anything about socialism, I knew that I was being anti-imperialist when I got out of the Navy.
mm,
And that's when I decided that that was going to be the direction I would take. I did not know I would be an activist.
yeah.
I just knew that I was going to oppose imperialism.
Mm. Well, that's beautiful, brother. And and speaking of being against capitalism and imperialism, it's like there's two sides, and many people don't know that they think, well, I'm against exploitation, I'm against homelessness, but they don't understand that they're actually on the side of socialism. Socialism stands against exploitation and oppression, things like homelessness and police murders of innocent people, all of this stuff. So, and state repression, mass imprisonment, all of the above. But when we talk about different socialism, and of course we have to think about different forms of ideology. And with our organization, Republic of Aztlan, we have a slogan, a saying that says ideology is key for Aztlan to be free. And that's very, because in order to be free, you have to have, you have to have ideology. You have to be able to understand, fighting and violence and all that stuff. That's just the beginnings, of a civil war or what have you. But once, everybody, a lot of people talk about revolution. After revolution, that's the big question, the big debate. After, how are you going to organize the economy? How are you going to care for millions of people? How are you going to run the industries of a country? And that's where socialism comes in. It helps guide us into how to properly organize people. But let me ask you, within this whole idea of socialism, there exists different forms of ideology, different lines, different political lines, or ideology is same thing. But within this, within this struggle over ideology and in the hearts and minds of the raza, there's things like revolutionary nationalists, and I've heard you. You said it. You're a revolutionary nationalist. I'm a revolutionary nationalist. I believe, like you, that that's the most scientific way forward for any oppressed people, including Chicano people. But my question to you, brother, is, for some of the listeners who may not understand what is revolutionary nationalism, let me ask you, what's the difference, and why did you choose revolutionary nationalism over being what so many are, and that is cultural nationalism? What's the difference? Why did you choose to be a revolutionary nationalist rather than a cultural nationalist?
I think when I first got involved, the first place I walked into was at the Coffee House
Mm,
in East LA.
mm,
It was been funded by the National Council of Churches. It was a group that called Young Chicanos for Community Action.
mm,
And Young Chicanos for Community Action, maybe 5 or 6 months later, would become the original Berets.
mm,
When I walked in there was a lot of youth in the youngsters, 18, 19, 20 years old. And we started talking about what we would later call the National Oppression of Chicanos. The questions of police brutality, the criminal justice system, education, jobs, welfare rights, and the social status or social standing of Chicanos in Mexico, we will be able to understand that. He's in the Southwest. And as we discussed these things, we tried to say, what was the solution? We're demonstrating and we're participating in different activities in the community. Um, but for us, the solution that we came to was that we were going to have national equality, or we were governed by the Negroes. It just wasn't going to happen. We see there was this imperialism. We just knew there was a preservation, and we were the oppressed nation. And
mm,
even though we used the term nation at that time, but and we came to the conclusion that the only way we could have equality would be secession, to separate from the system well, we would use imperialism, not that off.
Hmm.
and we had to separate from the reservation. And at that point, uh, why, why, because that was important to the ancestors at the time, and I still believe that way,
Mm,
that under imperialism, we're much more to have national equality.
mm,
And the other thing was that we were very much influenced by the Black Panther Party, and the founders, right from the very beginning. And some of the members did not understand that, that the Black Panther Party was Maoist. Some of us did, but even from the beginning of our soon after. And that also influenced me in terms of ideologically. And so look, the question of cultural nationalism, I don't want you to, the nationalism part of it, I don't like, because it tries to portray it as a road to liberation, and we can have our own culture, that's all we need. What are you going to call it? We're still going to be oppressed. We'll just be oppressed in our own language. That sounds good, well, or should be oppressed. And, but I do want to say that the cultural aspect, our culture is strong, it's beautiful, and it should always be revived. And our culture is not just what some of the cultural nationalists refer to as going back to indigenous ancestors, which is important. I think it's very important to take time to understand our history going far back, and the values of our people, values that might still exist today, and where we come from. But our culture didn't stop there. Our culture continued to develop. Um, I was talking with one time, and I told him, my parents are from Jalisco, and my friends from Jalisco. And Jalisco is like as the birthplace of my Mexican music.
mm.
Sometimes I just talk. Sometimes you don't drink. Sometimes and I love Mexican music. And I feel it. And that's the music. I'll be in the house by myself. I'll sit down and scream and sing whatever I want and drink. And I tell people that's my next music is indigenous music, especially Jalisco,
Mm,
which is part of Mexico. It's our music.
mm,
We're indigenous people who created it. That's indigenous people too. It doesn't just mean what happened 500 years ago, even though that's important. But
mhm,
it's important to keep those traditions up. People feel that we're going to save a lot of the traditional things that people do. And learning to speak different indigenous languages, which is also important, especially for First Nations in this country to be able to keep the languages alive, to make the indigenous languages alive. So I'm not against culture. I'm very strongly, in support of this culture and also to develop revolutionary culture.
mm,
Not cultural nationalism, but the culture of revolutionary struggle. Those things are important. But so I'm not against culture. I'm very much for it. But the road to liberation is revolutionary nationalism.
mm.
The national liberation of people and for the national liberation of Aztlan.
Mm, beautiful, brother. I love that. And yeah, I agree with you 100%, brother. And you know, and it's and if we look at the oppressor, we could see why the oppressor would, let's say, allow, um, bourgeois nationalists, or some call it cultural nationalists, or Huey Newton, the founder, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, called it pork chop nationalism, for the black nation, for the black cultural nationalists, because what he said, as that they would have African people, with pork chop sideburns, wearing the African garb, the African clothing, the dashikis, and and this and that, but without any revolutionary substance, meaning, like you said, we'll be oppressed by our own. And it's just like black capitalism or brown capitalism, and that's what it. And I agree, brother, that revolutionary nationalism, that's a different road, and that's the one that frees us from oppression. We're not trying to be oppressed by our own either. But speaking of, you mentioned Maoism, and I'm a Maoist. I believe that scientifically, it is the path that has led to the most liberations, successful liberations. Um, and I believe that, and I love that you are also a Maoist. But I want, for some of the listeners, you know, um, because sometimes, and I know, I can imagine, brother, what you went through back then, where today, when I tell somebody, because there's so much propaganda, state propaganda, especially from Mao's China, and people basically parrot what they've heard the imperialists say on the news, that Mao did this wrong and this wrong, and all of this stuff. So even today in 2022, when I tell people, whether they're in the movement or outside of the movement, that I do believe in Maoism, they look at me like like I'm from another planet. So I can imagine 40, 50 years ago, brother, when began to develop in these ways, how they must have looked. But for the listeners who, some may not understand the different ideologies, and there's many different, there's Trotskyism, Maoism, and there's a lot of different, things. But let me ask you, brother, when it comes to ideology, if you can explain, why Maoism, why do you believe that this is the most correct political, ideology?
uh, I was talking to Victor comment, I think I was talking to Carmen Wada, and I was talking about how she has, and your generation has something that we did not have when it comes to Mao. And that is that we have a historical perspective looking back the development of Maoism over the last 40, 50 years.
Mm,
And we didn't have that in 1872. We became Maoists like in the middle of the Cultural Revolution.
mm,
And one of the influences was that we were revolutionary nationalists. And the only ideology that applied to us in terms of revolutionary struggle was Mao and the teachings of Mao. And it was a very well-rounded ideology that we could utilize. Mao, first of all, Mao had his 33 rules, which we accepted, and Mao was opposed to revisionism, and he took it upon us to pick up the struggle against revisionism. And we did, both outside the Chicano movement and inside the Chicano movement. Mao was the one that told us this is the only way to liberation is what I said, political power comes out of the little gun. He doesn't tell us to go shoot anybody, but he did understand ultimately that would be the way that we have to go. That's not a practical question right now. But that's the way that we saw it. And we saw the revolutionary movements around the world. And a lot of them were carrying out people's war. They were learning from Mao. And we have to learn how to carry out people's war under the conditions of capitalism in this country. And when we look at the other ideologies, the other political movements, uh, the Communist Party, for example, the revisionists are trying to become very loyal Democratic Party members. They were not into the revolutionary struggle. And Trotskyites were even interested in nationalism, with any kind of nationalism, revolutionary nationalism, anything, they rejected it. So that was the path there. It was only Mao that made that path obvious. And then the other thing was that Mao, it was easy to understand. When you read Lenin, for example, most of the time when Lenin was writing, he was politicizing against somebody else. He's always pissed. When you see him, he's always pissed off. He is. And
yeah.
when you read Mao is being very patient with you, explaining things to you. This is a problem. This is the source of the problem. This is the cause of the causes. This is how we're going to, this is how we're going to solve this problem. And he does it through a lot of his writings. And so when you read them, it's much easier to understand them. It's the most practical application of that ethics that you're going to find. And look at philosophy in there because it's very, very practical how it explains it to you. And I mean, this is the way that people go when you come in and take over a village. They can first when you're coming first with doctors, medical agents, and church, they just motivate. They were teaching how to read, they were teaching about democracy, so they can run the village. Those are the kinds of things that can they recruit and teach them about the revolution.
Mm,
That's what we have to learn to do then, and that's what we have to learn to do now. Again, there was people uh, who didn't like it. People that were in the movement, the Chicago movement. didn't like it because we're wrong, but they couldn't say anything because we were outperforming. We outperformed them. We were harder than they did, and we had better results. We shut down on just on one. We planned and exercised a political strike in this town in 1972. We shut down 5 factories, 6 factories. 500 workers came out in a political strike to demonstrate downtown against Nixon's wage war. Nobody could do anything like that. Well, we weren't registering people to vote, or what we did, we did a fantastic than anybody else. Every job, every cent that we had as an Aztlan party and the movement, we excelled in it. And we did a hell of a good job. So when we consider ourselves a revolutionary tribe and a revolutionary work, and we worked hard, we worked our asses off. So people that didn't like what we were doing, okay, then I'll control this. Yeah. Mm. Well, we had worker study circles where people talk in English and Spanish, where we studied Mao, where we studied Lenin, and then we had practical classes in our office every Sunday morning. We were coming to study how to do labor organizing, and in the same classes, learning from early on how we organize worker reporters and this people why a handout party is necessary. And so yeah, oh, absolutely. And yeah, yeah. Mm. Mm. Beautiful, brother. And let's not forget the barefoot doctors of Mao's China, taking doctors to the countryside barefoot, going into the villages, providing free medical care. And that appeals to the hearts of the oppressed when, you're doing stuff and they're not getting paid for it. And there're just so many teachings that I love about Mao. And as you said, he spoke in a way that we can grasp. But not only that, he proved that, even the leading figures of the time, the revolutionary leaders, and I am a fan of Stalin, but even Stalin doubted Mao in the beginning, and he proved the revolutionary theories wrong by, saying that third world countries could not liberate themselves unless they had the help of developing countries. And he proved it wrong to the Chinese Revolution. First successful third world peasant revolution that acquired liberation. And I even read some of Maria Tegui down in Peru, and I believe, I've never heard people really speak on it. I believe he was influenced by Mao, because some of his work is really, I sometimes I think I'm reading Mao in some aspects, and so it's no surprise that the shining path and turned out to be Maoist. Chairman Gonzalo, rest in power, Chairman Gonzalo. But as we're talking about with Maoism and also the Chicano movement you brought up, and you brought up that some didn't like that you were, that you all were Maoists, and and pushing socialist theory, and I think it's really sad because I think that the missing spark within the Chicano movement today or in the future is, the lack in many cases of ideology and study groups studying socialist theory and revolutionary theory, and in particular Mao, and I believe that that's the missing link that's going to propel this movement forward to the next level of struggle. It is developing politically into into having this ideology like Maoism. And as you said, Mao laid it down, the political power. The oppressor's not going to hand over power. In every case, liberation has been acquired by armed struggle. And as you said, we're not saying that today. We're not in the ripe
elements for that, but somewhere, maybe in the next, 100, I don't know when, but whenever it happens, it's going to be through armed struggle for sure. But let me ask you, brother. Let me move on to this next question because time's slipping from us. But you know, in this conversation about Mao and Maoism and ideology, political line, um, there are, Mao, another lesson, another nugget that Mao left us with in a good teaching lesson is his concept of criticism, self-criticism, and that's a beautiful concept that all revolutionary organizations should adopt, and all people that consider themselves revolutionaries, what have you, should apply criticism, self-criticism. It's important, but if and that's in order to grow and to learn from our mistakes, learn from history, as they say, learn from history in order to transform the future. But let me ask you, when it comes to the Chicano movement, the early days of the Chicano movement, or at least I'll say that the period of when civil rights and the brown berets were created, and as a founder, brother, it's um let me stray off a little bit, but you must feel like, how do you feel? Let me ask you before I go on to the next question. How do you feel, brother, as a founding member of the original Brown Berets? How do you feel today seeing, and I know there's good and bad, there's that the dialectic there where, there's good and bad in everything, but how do you feel seeing as a founder, the first Brown Beret group, and now today seeing various formations across these false U.S. borders, and again, good and bad, but how does that make you feel, brother, knowing that you laid that down, brother. You all, the group that formed the Brown Berets, you guys, you laid that down, that blueprint. How does that make you feel, brother?
Well, when I look at the numbers today, I feel very, very proud. I feel very proud. Um, Especially, first, the dedication that you still see, and also the really broad ways that are pushing the steering forward, that are trying to become like revolutionary, how do you say, professional revolutionaries
Mm,
in terms of their understanding of revolutionary science,
mm,
scientific socialism.
mm,
And there's a process for revolutionary science and understanding that, and what it's going to take. And taking up the study of revolution seriously, getting involved in study circles, and study groups for reading and discussing these things. That's important.
mm.
We're not doing much more than that, but that's very important. And
Yes.
yes, it is sad when I see conflicts
Mm,
develop, and very, very sad because that's one of the, one of the criticisms, and probably the most important criticism I have of myself and always in the Chicano movement in the past was factionalism. And we spent
mm,
so much time fighting each other that we did, that it distracted us from the struggle. I know uh, in one university here in LA, there was a struggle in the nature, for example, between different factions. And it consumed so much of their energy that the reactionaries were able to take over Chicano studies in that
mm.
same school
Oh,
because they were not focused on what they were supposed to be doing. So the Chicano studies got out of their hands, they went into the hands of the reactionaries because we were fighting each other. And that's it's not something particularly about race at all. That is something that we had in the movement in those days. And it's something that we have to learn to try and avoid because it really, really weakens us. And I would like to see the boundaries all get along, because I love, it doesn't matter what faction you're in, I love all the boundaries.
mm,
That's just the way it is, and how to say, I really would like to see a real, because when we talk about unity, unity is a revolutionary task. It's not just a slogan, it's not just a sentiment. It's a revolutionary task. You can't go living a not unless you have that unity. It starts with us. And we have to be able to overcome those divisions. But that's the only criticism that I have. But like I said, that's one of the main things I have to keep in mind. And that's what I tell
Oh, beautiful words, brother. And what do you think? One thing I do know that there's internal, as Mao said, since we're on the topic of Mao, contradictions amongst the people, and he wrote a good article on that called "Contradictions Amongst the People." And this is internal conflict. This is horizontal crime and what have you. But one thing that I do know, and I know there's conflict, and as you said, it's it's really it's really crazy hearing you describe some elements of the early Chicano movement, or at least during the birth of the Brown Berets in the late '60s, early '70s. It's really crazy to hear you describe what can very well have been somebody today describing today's conditions within today's Chicano movement, and it's sad. But let me just say this, brother, and there's good and bad, as the Mexica said, "O Mateo," or as scientific socialists would say, dialectics. There's the good and the bad, and there's opposites, and it's a struggle of opposites in all society, in every sphere and essence of society and being. But let me say that so there is conflict. There was conflict then, and there's a lot of the same stuff going on. There was back then, people within the movement didn't like some Chicano people who were Maoists and socialists. And today there's some people who don't like Chicano people who are Maoists and socialists. So history does repeat itself. But even though there was contradictions amongst the people then, there's contradictions amongst the raza now. One thing that I can see, and that's what I love about dialectical materialism, studying, dialectics, the study of opposites, is because that's how we could solve problems. That's how we could get to the essence. As Mao said, you have to understand the essence of a thing and everything surrounding and influencing that thing in order to really understand that thing and to thus change that thing. So I believe that there's one thing that I can, because I think what can solve these kinds of problems where, you got internal conflict, what can solve it? There's only one thing that I know that people in the Chicano movement of today, do, do respect, and that is our elders such as yourself, brother. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is, what state they're in, what formation, what have you. One thing I know for sure, everybody loves and respects our elders. And so if I were asked what can solve this internal contradictions amongst the people, I would say it would be our elders. And and I know that if we were to have a formation of elders, doesn't necessarily mean they have to be today, active Brown Berets today. No, but elders that are known, acknowledged, and respected from the Chicano movement, of our history, people such as yourself and many others. If some elders were to get together, and when there is conflict between beret formations or other revolutionary organizations within the today's Chicano movement, I guarantee that everybody would acknowledge and respect what this group, collective, organization, council, whatever you want to call it, of elders of our movement decided, reviewed, analyzed, and decided. This is what we say. This is our official statement on this conflict, and that's the only thing. But that's we could do a whole show on that. But let me get to this next question, brother. That it's because we are slipping on time. But when it comes to, we've talked about Maoism, we've talked about the Chicano movement, strengths and challenges. But let me say, and we even talked about, let me ask you, within the Chicano movement of the 60s and 70s, was there a lot of Chicano socialist organizations that you remember? And why or why wasn't? Why? What do you think? Because when I look at history and read history, there's some, but it seems like the movement was really kind of, resisting developing politically. Was there a strong current of socialism within the Chicano movement of the 60s and 70s?
I think, I can address California, okay, because this is the state that I work in. And what's interesting is that there was quite a bit, but it wasn't, and it wasn't a thing necessarily socialist, but they were working with the numerous socialists. And, whether they were revisionists or not, whatever they became, the situation, but there was some resistance to it, but at the same time, you know, ATM was not the only Maoist leaning organization. Up and down California, especially in the Aztlan Party, there were chapters of the Aztlan Party who had moved towards Maoism, especially in Northern California. Like they used to live with, like some people in, Manhattan, like Rosita de la Raza in San Francisco, who was another organization, behind the seven Raza who were trying for killing a cop, right? And they were quit. There was up and down the state, a lot of in the National Party. There were people who advocate towards Maoism. What ATM did was during the first uh, Maoist organization here in LA, we met these people through our own National Party. And then we were talking, we never started to relate all these collectives of Maoists to form the non-discrimination movement. We already had a local LA discrimination movement before we came throughout the state, in Texas and New Mexico, and then into Chicago and Denver, and up and down the state of California. But what we did, we already had people that had the sentiments because of their own revolutionary experience. And so we were not the only ones, we were not the only Maoists, but we did take the lead in organizing the different Maoist collectives in California and in different parts of the Southwest. So we can't, I don't like look too much at the resistance to us because I'm always like forward looking at what's the next step we're gonna do, what are we gonna do next? And uh, and so I don't look, I don't tap over my shoulders who's watching us, we have work to do, and that was an attitude, but we were able to work effectively with everybody, like in the Aztlan Party, we were able to keep leading roles in both the Iowa Central Committee, the state caucuses, the state convention. We were Maoists, people knew we were Maoists, and people worked with us because we knew how to work with people, we knew how to carry out mass work. We very intentionally, we paid attention to it, and so we do have to carry out the mass learning. That's what we have to learn, and you have to learn it fast. You can't think you can't learn it. You have to learn it fast by the only way to do it, to learn it is to do it. And that's what we learn. The theory and practice that we learn to do it by doing it.
Learn by doing. And another Maoist concept of from the masses to the masses, right? When you're dealing with the masses, absolutely. Mao gave us a lot of nuggets there, but yeah, I agree. And there was another group, ATM, of course, is all over the history, Chicano history books. And in my opinion, that it was at least for California, I would say the most revolutionary organization for the Chicano movement of Khalifa Aztlan. But it was, it was, as you said, the first Maoist, Chicano Maoist or Maoist in Los Angeles organization. And that's big. But there was also La Junta, right? You were a part of La Junta?
Yes, we organized, after we came in from Berets, and we left from Berets, but it was not an antagonistic separation. We were proud of being down there. We were very, very proud of having been the founders of the boundaries from the former Junta. some raised, some people stayed raised and some left because of the impact. And the cops were trying to some division between us and the Brown race, they couldn't do it. They tried to get the Brown race to come and shoot up the office of La Junta. And the Brown race were going to do it. And we were going to fight the Brown race because, you know, we were brothers.
Yeah.
And we're just doing different types of work. And we were really proud of our history in the Brown race. No way we can, you know, attack or criticize the Brown race. We're just going to move forward with the work. And at the time, there was a lot of gunfighting, a lot of shootings taking place. And we decided that that's what we were going to be doing our work in our Junta. And one of the things, I won't talk too much about this because I think this really belongs to Justin David to speak to this, but we did, already, one of the things that we had in going to approach the different gangs here in East LA was that we shared, essentially shared a common ideology. They were very hugely Chicano nationalists. Our children is only 10 years old. Hugely Chicano nationalists. And so when we went there, we already had an ideological commonality because we were Chicano nationalists too.
Yeah.
So we were revolutionary nationalists, and we had that commonality. So we had basically start conversations. We talked about how we should not be treating each other, how we should be taking on the kids, how we should be taking on the state, or the state of our people. You know, and we had success in that, but the real success came from Johnson Radio, because I got to give you the credit. Johnson Radio was a big hazard. That's what the gangster in LA at the time. He was a big hazard. He had done time in prison and he got out. And so when he spoke, he had standing. When people listened to him, he was able to have meetings of 200 to 300 day members at a time at this church in Lincoln Heights and other places. You know, and he was able to do a lot of good organizing. You know,
He sounds like the Chicano Fred Hampton. He's beautiful. I love that.
I have to give him the credit because he was one that really developed the organization to its peak. I was being some other companies started it, but they didn't take off until he got involved in it. He really took off with it.
Well, that's beautiful, brother. And yeah, and he, I've spoken with John as well. I need to make contact make contact with him again. But let me ask you, because we are running out of time. We have a few more minutes, about 10 more minutes or so. But let me ask you about the Chicano Moratorium, and why is it necessary? Because it's continuing, it's continuing. And, why is it necessary today and until we actually acquire national liberation for our people?
So one right off the bat would be that every national movement, you know, needs as how it is to commemorate its struggle and its martyrs and not version of different. More thing to do here in our way is split into two because there are two different missions in which to be. One, one group, they're both doing very good work, but they have two different attitudes of housing. In commemorating, one group feels that they should just be commemorating by doing that, it's how you say, because I don't want to stereotype them in that way, but they want to have the speakers and they want to have, which are, this last time, all the speakers were Democratic Party progressives who spoke. And, and they still have a lot of good booths, with furniture and stuff like that. And they should be commemorating that way for the community, commemorating the the other group has a different take on it. They feel that it should be commemorated because of the struggle that they represented. There's a anti-imperial struggle against the war in Vietnam, and it was a huge anti-imperialist demonstration that we didn't have. And within that group, there's also the revolutionary nationalists who feel that this was a battle that took place here. That day, Chicano masses took on the cops and really kicked the cops' asses. I've talked about this before, how there were caravans of cops going to reinforce the cops at the park when the rebellion broke out, and those caravans of cops going back to the substation for all the cops that were the
Mm.
church substation, they have to release the preachers to be able to have room for the cops to walk in the walk.
Wow.
And that's the those are battles that this battle at heart. And we have to commemorate that. We have to show people this is our struggle. This is how we fight. This is how we took on the struggle against terrorism, against national oppression. And there's huge responsibility. Three of our people who showed that faith.
Mm.
And we're not going to forget that. We're going to
Mm.
remember them, remember their faith, and honor the memory of our martyrs. And this is to us, it's like a national holiday, a national reward that we should always remember that our liberation came through struggle. Through struggle, anti-imperial struggle, even through getting physical and fighting with these cops and people even having our martyrs,
Mm.
our martyrs.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, brother. And I agree that, it's kind of like for the black nation, you see them, just recently, the state, recently made Juneteenth a holiday. So they're always trying to, basically trying to derail resistance movements by kind of trying to guide them onto the path of, being capitalists and working with for bourgeois democracy within the confines of the oppressor nation's legal system, rather than us say no, we what, because I guarantee, brother, that in the future, should our movement start to blossom as it did back then with 20, 10, 20, 30,000 people at the Chicano Moratorium, I guarantee the state will probably make the Chicano Moratorium and somehow, in some way, rename it and somehow make that date a holiday like they did Juneteenth, a day of black struggle and resistance. And so, we have to, I agree, we have to watch out that, any resistance doesn't get derailed and taken down the wrong path. But let me ask you, brother, because we are almost done. We have a few more minutes. Let me ask you, you've answered a lot of stuff, but the last question I wanted to ask you, this show is called Free Aztlan, and I did that for a specific reason. I'm sure you understand that, that's very important for our people to not just have a voice, but also the name that guides that voice of what we're trying to do. And we're not trying to, vote for a Democrat or, march on. No, we are not doing that. We have a different course. But let me ask you, brother, what, in your opinion, in your words, and I ask a lot of people this that come on the show, what does a free Aztlan look to you? What does it look like to you, brother?
Okay, there's three answers to that. And, one, if you need to geographically, would be land territories that are comprised of geographic, so the geographic territory is land station. And to me, by free as that is truly free, that can only come about as a result of a victory over imperialism. And that the victory, like this, the victory over imperialism would be simply the independence plus liberation from imperialism, which isn't, always going to be the case because nations can become independent and still be under the heel of imperialism. We have to be keeping things to be free, but that does not stop us from fighting for the independence of our son, because we don't know what the future will be like. I would like to see an Islam as a socialist republic. That's not guaranteed. Because it's not all national relation struggles, even though they were led by Marxist feminists, were able to achieve a socialist society. And I'm talking about South Africa, for example. And even though the ANC was led by members of the South African Communist Party, and then the leaders of South Africa, but in Canada, we could classify that as a socialist revolution. It's free and independent, but it still has a lot of contradictions in it. For us, we have to keep that straight up because right now, if you want to see what a Islam will look like, without, that struggle, you can look at the southeast cities here in southeast LA, where the communities are 95%, Aztlan. City councils, 95% Aztlan, all controlled by corrupt, uh, Democratic Party officials.
Mm.
You know, and that's what I think it's time to look at when you're kind of carrying through random revolutionary work. There are people who are doing that revolutionary work, Maria Estrada is one of them, exposing, I think she was on the show, exposing the corruption of the Democratic Party, and the very, very concrete way that it's not in our country.
Yeah.
You carry out that exposing the Democratic Party, which is a long-range strategy to pull people away from the reformist and the real liberal imperialist Democratic Party.
Mm. Well, thank you, brother. And I just also want to say, it was an honor to have you on the show, and I'm going to have you back again and get into some more, conversations about ideology and different things that there's a few questions I wasn't able to ask, but next time, brother. And we're all out of time, brother, comrade. I just want to say thank you for your service to Aztlan, brother.
Thank you for having me over tonight as well. I would love to come back and talk more.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, me too, brother. We're gonna get along great. Good, brother. Okay. All right, brother. Okay. Oh, Mateo.